So I had an accident on my Aventon bike and I bent the front fork, and when you're riding the bike you can tell more about when you look down at it from above, but like if you could look at that, you see that inaccurate angle, see that bad angle there. So that's what I'm going to try to take care of today. Again, I don't know if you can tell from where you are and for how this is being captured, but you should be able to see that that's not straight. If you look at that, it's sort of leaning off to the one side, and it's not my camera angle, it's just bent. So I got the bike up on the rack now, and I'm ready to start taking the old fork off and installing the new fork. 15mm wrench to take off the front wheel. Removal of the fender. On my new part that came in, apparently the end of the fork went right through the box, so I'm really crossing my fingers that the new fork is not bent. The new part, just from my first impressions, looks okay. Although I'm surprised they didn't put some kind of protection over the end of that, you know, for shipping. Because, and there's also like a big, you know, dent in the box here, so this thing took some pretty hard knocks, but it looks okay. It was wrapped in the bag, and they did ship it promptly, and it was available, so that's a good thing. When taking the brake off, I noticed that there is a thicker portion of a bracket that's underneath the cylinder here, the activation, the brake cylinder. So right here is wider than this, so I'll just have to remember when you know, if you put that back on again, you don't want to get that flipped. One other thing I did is I put a washer in between the brake shoes, just in case you accidentally hit the brake lever and collapse that. It could be difficult to spread apart again, so I got a washer about the same thickness as the caliper and or as the rotor, and put it in there. And you could tape it in, but it seems to be held in pretty well. There is a good possibility that when you loosen these handlebars, there's 3 separate rings here, but this could slip right out and fall on the floor. It could fall on your foot, could fall on somebody. Just so hold this when you're loosening this. I only have 2 hands, so if this one falls, I don't really care, because it's, you know, this is the one I'm throwing away. There might still be some good parts on it, but it looks like it's going to stay there for now. But see, these on the Aventon, there's these 3 different rings. You pull them all off, and then there's a bearing that slips off, and then there's a bearing on the bottom, which I'm hoping was not damaged in my accident. Hopefully you can see better how bent this thing actually was. Look at that. Look, the whole thing is like bent off to my left. To the left of your screen, I think, unless the screen's flipped when I post this. But yeah, man, that thing, if you had the right kind of tools, you might be able to bend that back. You know, if you had benders and vices and stuff. I don't have any of that here, so I just ordered a new fork. But yeah, it's a shame. Kind of hate to throw it away. Maybe I'll keep it for the rest of the parts that are on it. So the bottom bearing has a little sleeve that had to come off of the old part, and luckily the bearing was okay, but there's a little sleeve that goes down over that, and then this bearing it's intact, thank goodness. It didn't break the bearing, and it's kind of beveled to fit the bevel that's, you know, here, so that slides down there. This bearing goes, let's see if I can show you. See, there's a bevel in there. This bearing will sit exactly in there with that bevel, like as so. One thing, if you're doing this, that you may want to know is that I'm looking at the old fork, and you see there's an insert that's actually got the female thread. It looks like it's driven in. Well, here's the new fork. Absolutely nothing in it. I would have thought they would have at least given me that, but they didn't, so that thing looks like that's really in there. I'm going to have to try to drive that out of there. So, that's how I got it out, with that sledgehammer and this long breaker bar, which I don't like to beat on, but it was the hardest thing I had. And as you can see, this thing is it's a double gripper. And once I hit it a few times with that, it popped out of there. So I'll get it back in the new fork and we'll go from there. Another thing that I think you should know is that this assembly is held on by two different ways. There's this ring that pushes down into the piece that I drove into the tube, and then there are these two Allens on the handlebar, and these are the only two things that hold this whole assembly together. Now most of the time all the weight is on the front wheel and it's pushing down. So probably the best thing to do is to get the final adjustment after you get the bike on the ground again. But if you get this too tight, if you push these two pieces too far in, you're going to know it's too tight because this won't turn. You'll have trouble with that turning. And on the other side of this, if you see a lot of space between here, you got it too loose. So maybe the best thing is just to get it together, get it assembled loosely until you get the wheel on it. You get it, and then you can align everything better and get the tensions better. But it's just snug, but not too snug, because if you get it too tight, this won't turn. So when I put the caliper back on the new front fork, I didn't tighten it up because obviously when we get the wheel in, we're going to have to make some alignments. And it's made for that purpose, you know, it's made to go back and forth. So I just kind of left things loose until we get that wheel in. So here we go, guys, all fully assembled and ready to get back on the road again.